Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the final day of the Caribbean AgTech Investment Summit. It's been an amazing opportunity to really exchange ideas and to look at the future of Caribbean AgTech. The AgTech, this is the title of this last final session here. We're having a roundtable discussion on the future of AgTech in the Caribbean. Over the past 2 days, you would have had an opportunity to explore with a number of participants what is happening in the AgTech space in the Caribbean, and there are a lot of exciting things happening. So first of all, before we get into the roundtable, I want to really just say a big thank you to the Caribbean Export Development Agency, and it's led by Deodat Maharaj, and I think Demi is online with us this morning. So thank you, Caribbean Export, for staging this really first ever Caribbean AgTech Forum. Thanks also to Kuiper and to Suzette and her team, because they've been amazing in putting this on. It's been really an exciting time because I'm really excited by this subject and by this subject matter and how we're going to look at the future. So we've looked in the last 2 days at what's happening in honey, what's the opportunity in honey, what's the opportunity in fruit and vegetables. The Caribbean, as everyone knows, imports 85% of its food, something in the region of $5 billion US. So we really need to look at how can we increase our productivity, increase our ability to supply to the Caribbean in the fruits, vegetables, and other agricultural products, meat in particular, seafood, all the things that we're importing. We need to be able to up our productivity to be able to supply that in the region. And how are we going to do it? AgTech is going to be the big enabler for the Caribbean. So what does the future look like? Well, I wanted to look first of all at which trends are most applicable and implementable. And I'm going to ask all the panelists whom I'm going to introduce in 2 minutes to think about these trends that you will see on the next slide and how you think these trends will impact the future in the Caribbean. So I'm hoping that that other slide will come up, but if it doesn't, I can speak to it. So in the meantime, I'm going to introduce the panel. We have a very exciting and quite an extensive panel to talk to us this morning. Okay, there's a slide. So the top 8 trends shaping the future of the agriculture industry. And as I said, I'm asking the panelists just to have a look at that. They're all trends that we have discussed over the last couple of days. And so I just want to, this is really just for people to think, and eventually we'll be discussing all these trends as we go through this morning's proceedings. So let me introduce the panel that we have here today, a real expert panel, starting with Vassel Stewart, who is the president of the Caribbean Agribusiness Association. Vassel is an agribusiness and international marketing development specialist with over 30 years of diversified and practical experience in agribusiness value chain development. So Vassel really has a wealth of knowledge of the entire region. He's worked across public and private sector organizations in various positions. Then we've got Ralph Breckov, who is the Chief Commercial Officer of Island Growers Caribbean. Ralph is a Dutch Canadian who has worked and lived in the Caribbean for over 10 years after a successful corporate real estate career. And he has witnessed firsthand the challenges of farming across the region. And he really has a wealth of knowledge. I think he has a base in St. Lucia, but he has roamed across the Caribbean and has some very exciting technology, particularly in greenhouses, to share. Then we have Wayne Elliot, who is the Coordinator, Innovation and Productivity in Caribbean Firms and Clusters for the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank. Wayne is an international development professional with strong project management, economic analysis, and research skills. Wayne has a wealth of knowledge and experience in management and operational and procurement support to research business, climate reform, SME development, and clustering projects. So he, again, is someone who has gone across a lot of different sectors. Ray Klein, from the largest capital markets advisory firm in the Caribbean, he's the group head of investment banking for Republic Financial Holdings. And Republic, you all know Republic Bank and Republic Financial Holdings. He's actually responsible for mergers, acquisitions, and debt capital markets and structured finance. So Ray is Mr. Finance personified, and he's going to give us a perspective on the financing of agribusiness projects in the Caribbean, which is obviously of huge importance and a vital enabler. We then have Mr. Roel Messi, Chief Executive Officer of FarmFit. And FarmFit is an innovative finance group which actually finances farms and agribusiness, which is exactly what we need to take us further. He's been very instrumental in working with the FMO, which is the Dutch Development Finance Organization. So he knows what development finance is about. We've also got Dimitri van Ramdonk. Dimitri is from Edfi Agri-Finance. So Dimitri is an experienced impact professional, passionate about entrepreneurship and development. He joined Agrify, which is an EU-funded blended facility in developing countries as a fund manager. So again, another financial head who can shed light on how do we get more financing into agribusiness. We also have Jacko Obels, who has a great title, Thought Leader for Agriculture and Commodity Trade for Capgemini. Now, Capgemini, as we know, is one of the leaders in digital transformation, technology, and engineering services. And Jacko is an agronomist and a self-styled plant-oholic. So he leads the Global Center of Excellence in Agribusiness within Capgemini, bridging the gap between industry and consultancy to create the right solution. So Jacko has roamed the globe finding solutions to agribusiness problems. We also have a discussant on women in AgTech, Amy Wu, who is going to be joining us later, and a perspective on youth in AgTech from Peter Dillon, who will also be joining us later. So to kick off the discussion, I wanted to start with Vassel. Vassel, I wanted to ask you, what are the key agri-technologies currently being used in the Caribbean, and what does the agri-tech landscape look like?
Thank you very much, Diane. Good morning to everyone and welcome to day 3. I would like to then begin by placing the current status of AgTech in the region within context by first looking at what it is that would be critical for us to really attract investment in the AgTech sector. Number one is whether we have the kind of public policy, public support in place. And we are this week looking at the Caribbean Week of Agriculture. And the theme for this year's Week of Agriculture is that it's transforming our food systems. That's the theme this year. And governments recognize that that transformation is going to require a new approach to agriculture. And they have all that knowledge and have embraced the need for AgTech. So I think that is the first thing we need to recognize. They have also gone beyond the general recognition and the general statements to indicate that they have a specific target. By 2025, they want to reduce imports by 25%. That is going to take specific action. And we have seen where they have already begun to put not just words, but actual cash financial support behind these positions. So we see investment in agricultural infrastructure, we see investment in agro-processing infrastructure, and we've seen a range of incentives aimed at attracting the investment. What has happened so far is that we have seen the private sector responded in those areas where the barrier to entry in high-tech is low. So a lot of what has been happening is in the area of marketing, using existing technologies, particularly online marketing. So we see from farm level to the consumer level, strong utilization of the technology in information transfer, in financial activities, and in actual trading. So that's a strong area. We've seen some movement as well in the area of greenhouse production systems. And although that can be a fairly capital intensive undertaking, because it can be scaled, you find that even at the small farmer level, there has been adaptation of some level of controlled atmosphere production, maybe without artificial systems such as artificial lighting, artificial cooling. But they have begun to move into that in that direction in utilizing controlled atmosphere production systems. We're seeing that taking place also in the area of aquaculture. Where we're not seeing as much investment is in perhaps the area of big data. That although there's that awareness, there has not been a significant movement in that direction. And that's an area that we need to look at. So part of that will require support at the institutional level. So we need to see, for example, the universities beginning to play a more integral role in that. We need to see the development institutions collaborating and utilizing data and providing that as a service to the business sector. Notwithstanding that, recently we have seen a number of large firms, mainly based on government's policy support, that have begun to invest in the sector. We're seeing in Jamaica Supermarket Association, one of the largest players there, they themselves have gone into direct investment, drawing on international technologies that they are working with the Spanish consultants, and they are making significant investment. We see the same thing happening here in Trinidad. $60 million by one would probably term a medium-sized entrepreneur. So there's a growing interest, growing commitment, growing willingness. We now need to bring the public sector policies and strategies along with the institutional arrangements, and then bring private sector as part of a continuum. I think if we do that, we can begin to see significant growth in the AgTech sector in the region. And of course, the major issue of financing, which I'm sure we'll discuss, given the number of persons on this channel, on this panel that will be looking at that issue.
Yes, we're very rich in, thank you very much for that, Vassel. We're very rich in financial minds this morning. But just picking up on your question, on your statement on big data, do you think that the big companies, agricultural companies, agribusiness companies in the region are ready to pay for big data? Because obviously generation of data is one thing, but you need some financing to actually manipulate, analyze, and utilize this data.
I think so. You may be aware that at the level of the heads of government, they have recently brought together the major food sector companies, particularly what we'll term our regional conglomerates, around the table to look at this whole issue of ensuring that by 2025, they are in fact in a position to reduce the imports. And those firms have actually given a commitment to do whatever is required to achieve this target. In fact, they have made a commitment for and have put in place a 5-year plan, and have identified specific commodities, specific areas of investment. And in fact, one of the first things that was put on the table is the lack of the kind of data that would allow them to do bankable investment proposals. And so you begin to see, for example, the Supermarket Association willing to provide data, which may not be quite the same thing as big data, but critical data for analysis. In the States, for example, you'll find that the Supermarket Association will sell data so that someone undertaking analysis can have the level and quality of data to do proper analysis. Here in the region, that's not readily available. There's no move based on the structure that is in place to get the Supermarket Association to provide that more finite level of data. At the big data level, there's discussion even with the Meteorological Office to see, in addition to your provision of weather data, based on your access to satellite information, can we begin to look at that as a basis for widening the service? How can that be used, for example, monitoring on-farm activity. So there's that interest. I think they are committed, and I think the government is in fact providing the kind of incentive to drive them in that direction.
That's extremely encouraging. And I know from my time in London, working in the rum business, how important that consumer data can be, and how important understanding the consumer and consumer trends can be. Because through RFID technology, that has really revolutionized how the basket of goods is understood, and how data can be mined through supermarkets. But coming back to the production side, I want to move to Ralph now. Ralph, I want to ask you, Vassel spoke about production and AgTech in production, such as greenhouses. I know you're a passionate advocate of the greenhouse farming and vertical farming. So what does the AgTech space look like for you from where you sit in terms of building a climate resilient agriculture in the region, and how will that impact the agricultural landscape?
Hey, good morning, Diane. Thank you. And thank you to the Caribbean Export Development for inviting me to tag along. I'm thrilled that this seminar is happening this week. We on our side, we've been focused on this sector now for 4 years. So it's great to see everybody now talking about this in the region and focusing on some of the new technologies that are available to help increase production with taking into account our energy costs and our water resources. There are a lot of different solution sets, both in crop production, dairy, fisheries, and it's exciting to hear everybody joining a board to talk about all this. Just to mention, I'm actually sitting in Tobago and not St. Lucia, but I have spent quite a bit of time in St. Lucia. Our company, and I actually I wear 2 hats here today, Island Growers Caribbean and Breckov Limited, which is our new entity here in Trinidad and Tobago. When we looked at the production and the yields in crop farming in the Caribbean, one thing obviously stood out, that we can't grow enough through traditional means to feed ourselves, and hence the high import of foods in general, but also in fresh produce. And of that 5 billion a year that's coming into the region, about 1.4 billion of that is fresh produce crops that we either can't grow here or can't grow enough of. So how do we solve that problem? Well, there's a lot of climate mitigation solutions and projects ongoing throughout the Caribbean for traditional soil-based farming, for tropical fruit farming, root crop farming, which is some of our strong points here in the Caribbean. The crops that we're importing are what we call temperate or cold weather crops, which we can't really grow very well here because of the climate, because of the soil conditions, because of the pestilence. So what our company is doing is taking an active role in attracting investment into the region to develop greenhouse farms. Now, the problem is, greenhouse farming isn't new in the region. It's been around for decades, but it's using a very inexpensive type of coverings that can't survive even a tropical storm, and a lot of them have been destroyed, and because they weren't insured, they were never rebuilt. So our first order of business was to engineer with our partners at Sprung a Category 5 hurricane resistant greenhouse system that is engineer certified, that meets all building codes and is insurable. Because at the end of the day, to attract private capital investment and debt capital investment, as Mr. Klein is interested in doing, we have to mitigate the risks to agriculture. And the only way to do that is to, right now in the Caribbean, which is probably one of the most hostile environments in the world, with our hurricanes and our floods and our droughts and everything else that our farmers battle with every day, is to grow in a controlled environment. Obviously, there's a lot of different variations of that. There's indoor vertical farming, container farming, and greenhouse farming. The former two require a heck of a lot of energy. So if you're in an island like St. Lucia or St. Kitts, where energy costs are 38 to 40 cents a kilowatt hour, it's just not possible. You can add a solar component to it, but our vision is to use the natural solar energy that we have in abundance here through our greenhouse systems. Use that energy to grow the plants. Our systems are completely integrated to save energy, to save water, and ultimately produce very high value, very high quality crops that are totally imported, and do so at an effective price point where we can compete with local crops and make it more accessible to everybody in the market. So a lot of different solutions. We're focused on one. We're currently building out the largest greenhouse farm in the region here in Tobago. We are going to be looking at up to 12 acres of greenhouse production. We are going to be very focused on fresh berry production, which is 100% import. We're building farms. We have farms underway in Barbados and Antigua and other islands. And with our new partnership at Berry Cove with ANSA Group, we now have a capital stack to expand across the region to every island. So we got a lot to do over the next few years, but we're pleased and happy to be on that track now.
Thanks, Ralph. And what challenges have you seen in implementing this kind of technology? Have you met favorable acceptance everywhere you've been?
No, to be honest, not in every island. I was absolutely thrilled to read about your Minister Shaw's announcement during this session this week about creating a 5-year investment plan for agriculture. From our standpoint as solution providers in the region who want to help and operate in every island, that is the ticket to success. And I'm so pleased to see Jamaica take the lead in that again, by creating an incentive plan to attract investment in agriculture. Every island needs to do that. It's not complicated, but to have a cabinet sort of pre-approved structure that makes it very simple for foreign investors to work with local partners to enter a new market. And Vassel mentioned it, government legislation to promote the investment in agriculture is absolutely critical. But no, not every island is doing that. In fact, some islands are very protectionist and actually don't want foreign direct investment in agriculture. So, and yet they're still importing 90% of their food. So very pleased to see that happening in Jamaica. And I really hope that all other ministers of agriculture across the region take note and follow your model.
Great, thanks for that, Ralph. And I think Vassel should also take note, because as CABA, he's in a great position to lobby CARICOM and other CARICOM agricultural ministers to take on board a regional strategy. As you said, Vassel, there is a regional strategy called 25 in 5, and we really need to give teeth and action to that strategy. So JAMPRO is really excited about this strategy because we had a big hand in developing it, and we're actually going to be implementing it. We're going to be driving the implementation. So we are super excited about that. So thanks, Ralph. So moving on now, I mean, there's a lot of talk in AgTech circles about, and a lot of fear, I would say, on the part of small farmers. How are we going to get involved in it? Are we going to get left behind because they're going to be big farms with a lot of technology, very capital intensive, and no room for small farmers? Jacko, I think as thought leader, loving that title, I'm sure there are some best practice models that you can share where we can keep those small farmers engaged and get them on board with the technology and the adoption of technology. Maybe you want to share some of that best practice?
Okay, I will do that. So thank you for the introduction and thank you for inviting me. Always good to get a new context of looking of your experience, how you can use it. So I asked Diane why you asked me, and then I started talking about the digital donkey. And the digital donkey is actually, I think the discussion is always about tractors in farming. So you need a tractor to farm, but you understand 80% of the farmers in the world doesn't have a tractor. So they only have used manual labor or labor of animals. So they're going to use that. And why invest heavily when you have a mobile phone? Everyone has a mobile phone. And if you can share the knowledge or share the knowledge and make that applicable to the smallholders, they can have an income on their acres. So they don't have to invest heavily on that part. And I will explain some story about Kenya. We did a project in Kenya for 20,000 smallholders. And we built a platform in their local language, and we used for that the backbone of M-Pesa, the paying network in Africa. So a lot of people even can't read, so that is also a thing. So you also have to bring it on, and the mobiles are the old Nokias. So how you can bring that through the table? So we build a platform around that people get in the local language. They got the message, what is relevant for them in their, or based on their location where they are. So also you got the GPS in your mobile, you can see where they are. You can even see their fields. So then he got text message on the moment they need the text message, not hundreds of text messages a day, only one a week probably, or one every 2 weeks, depending on what's happening. The good thing what we did there, the people were able to have a rise of their yield of about 300%. They have the security of income, so they could send the children to school. Now looking at the Caribbean, it's quite different by organization. I think you have a big area to cover, a lot of different climates. And I think when Vassel talked about data as ingredient, so I'll say data as the next ingredient of farming. So next to fertilizers, pesticides, and seeds, data is the next ingredient of farming. So if you could add data and commoditize or share that, and also make it applicable to the local crops, because I think that is more important. There's a lot of farming systems for soy and for corn crops, but you have to adapt it to the region. You're not focusing on the crops you have to focus on the crop regions for the crops. So, and data, when you use the big data and all the system knowledge available, you can easily transfer it to the region, so also to the local farmers. So that are my thoughts around it. So, and actually don't trust what I say, the big companies that try to sell you a tractor. You don't need it, actually. That's what I'm saying. Just make it easy and simple and use mobile and data for the local circumstances. And also what we also did with, and that's for the bankers for Ray. So all we built behind it to see or the farmers are able to pay the crops or the seeds, because you also have investment around it. So we made also some risk assessment based on the back from of the farmer can pay or how much you can pay, and also mitigate that risk a bit also for the farmer. So if you see a farmer not having a good crop, you can take immediate action to go to him. But because of the right region, you can't travel directly to him. So you have to have local people that can support them locally and that kind of thing. So that's what we also brought to the table in that project. Currently we're rolling this out, also this project in India, total different culture, total different crops. And our experience with this is the model works, but you have to look carefully on the context, how to implement it. So to see how it goes on. But the living standards go above, and the yields are rising. And the other thing I want to bring to the table, what I find of the suppliers in the industry, so the input suppliers, they have to take responsibility for the yield of the farmers. So if they take responsibility for the yield of the farmers, you can give the farmers certainty of income, because that is one of the biggest problems with the farmers in the world. When you look at malnutrition, it's the highest within the farming community. So it's a bit crazy around that way you look at that. And the other trend I want to see is that you diversify your crops. So data can also make you more, that you not only focus on one crop, but focus on a lot of different crops that make us even more resilient for your income, but also more to the risk side. And I'm not knowing actually the crops from the Caribbean, but I know you have probably fruits that are so tasty locally that I don't know. And Ralph is starting with strawberries. They are quite exclusive, but you probably have crops I really like to taste. So yeah, and you also use that kind of crops, and also look differently at crops, not only for food. There's also a thing, because you also can make fibers out of it. Yeah. Fibers for clothing, fibers for other materials. So be more inventive on that point. So the questions I'm having a lot is the moment is not only on the food side, but also fun products. So you also have products that are fun. You can drink your beer. That's a fun product. You can also make it, feed, clothes, flowers. You have a lot of different crops. You also can have added value out of it. So be more creative in your crops, not only focusing on what universities teach you, but also what is locally as a crop there. And so a friend of me of Harvard is teaching that. So looking at more ethnographic crops, local crops that are more resilient in the region.
I think that's a great point, Jacob. Well, you've made a number of really great points. I think the question of fruits and the diversity of fruits that we have in the Caribbean. I mean, we have fruits from Asia, we have fruits from Africa, we have vegetables from South America. We have a variety in the Caribbean, which is pretty much unequal if you look at our acreage. We also, and I think your point about R&D is really critical. Vassel was talking yesterday about cassava and the uses of cassava. So cassava goes from, terra chips, cassava chips and vegetable chips, to an ingredient that replaces grain in beer, which Red Stripe locally has been using cassava as a replacement for barley. So yes, we have a lot of opportunity, but we're not really doing sufficient R&D. And I think that is one of the critical questions that we really have to find a way to finance and to get our governments on board with looking at what do we do with our fruits, because fruits are not only consumed fresh, they're consumed in all sorts of preserved forms. So,
yeah, and Diana, really to make you more comfortable, also in Western Europe, we don't use our legacy and all of old products. So we only focus on the big crops. And there's also a discussion about diversification of crops. And also the research is not, they're not investing it because the acreage is actually too low, but you have to invest in your future. So that's a discussion. And I saw Vassel wants to also say something. So I let you the words there, Vassel.
So I had one other question. Vassel, go ahead. But I had one other question for you, Jacob. But go ahead.
Okay, perfect.
No, I was just endorsing what Jack was saying, in that there are a range of indigenous, I mentioned earlier on, especially in the herbs and spices industry. We have a range of herbal products that have been partially bioassayed and have indicated that they have a range of medicinal benefits. In addition, when you move from there to our fruits, I mentioned yesterday what is known as Plum City in the Eastern Caribbean, June plum in Jamaica.
Yeah,
that's a major product for a range of value-added products, from juices, you mentioned use in fiber. that's the seed of that is a fibrous product that can be used in a wide range of areas. So yes, I endorse fully that concept of differentiating ourselves in the international market, both from a product as well as from a market perspective. So fully endorse that, Jacob. So I wanted to say that.
Yeah, and someone in the chat is saying, Mr. Kretschmann is saying that they are busy researching various crops from mangosteen to butter fruits. So there is research going on, is the point that Mr. Kretschmann is making. And I think we just have to do a whole lot more on that score. We are also looking at a major bamboo project in Jamaica, which is really focused on bamboo pulp for fiber. So, you know, we are looking at the whole opportunity for fiber. One other question for you though, Jacko, is how do you organize small farmers? Because what we find in the Caribbean is a lot of small farmers don't want to be organized. We're a very individualistic bunch in the Caribbean, I would say. And so they don't necessarily want to be organized in the ways that have actually been successful in places like the Netherlands, where you have large cooperatives. So how did you find in Kenya the cultural acceptance of organization into different structures that make it easier for to receive technology and also to deploy technology?
That's a good question, but when you look at Africa, you have the tribes, and we're not used to that. So you have to be open to that, and you have to take your time. So you have to convince them. It's not a project plan is never the same as in Europe. So, and to give you the other thing, I worked in Russia, and project plans looks quite different, but it also works. In the end, it works on the right time. And I think that's the same in Africa. You have to trust the people and give them also their space to talk with you. So you have to gain the trust, but that takes time. The other thing is time is with the climate crisis, of course, is we don't have that much time, but we also screwed us with that climate crisis. So that has a very negative impact. So I'm always, let's say that discussing that with myself, I'm a bit ambiguous about it in my own mind. So how are you going to bring that together? But you have to be very listening to the local culture, but also start talking with those people, but also get close to the people. So in my experience, if I talk from Western Europe to Caribbean, it's not going to work. But I'm standing next to the farmer and I try to understand the farmer. You're going to get on the same level, because I'm also a farmer on my background. And I asked him, how you do that? Why you do that? What's your background? But show the real interest, not the colonial attitude. So, but real interest in the people, and also interest in the culture. But from my point of view, I never going to understand the culture. So I never understand Russia. I even don't understand the Netherlands. So I'm already living almost 50 years there, but I don't even understand the Netherlands. So, but culture is quite different and difficult.
Yes, accepted. Well, thanks for that perspective. So I wanted to bring IDB into the conversation. I think Wayne is online, and I wanted to ask Wayne how the IDB views AgTech, and do you currently have any Caribbean projects in this area? Are you looking for any? I think there was a call for AgTech projects recently. Have you found any really interesting projects for IDB to weigh in on? Wayne?
Thank you for the question, Diane. Good morning, everyone. And I really want to congratulate the organizers of this conference. I'm super stoked to be here, and I'm happy to know that there are others in this space, and there's a lot of growing interest. This morning, I'm going to be speaking on the behalf of Compete Caribbean, which is a multi-donor facility. We focus specifically on private sector development, but we sit within the IDB. One of our donors is the IDB, but we also have 3 other donors, one being the United Kingdom Commonwealth and Development Office. the Government of Canada, and the Caribbean Development Bank. And you are right, we did have an AgriTech call, and essentially what we were looking for would have been very innovative ideas that could assist us in marrying agriculture or agri-processing with technology. For a number of reasons, which we heard over the last 2 days as to why AgriTech is a perfect space to operate, it made total sense for us to come in here. And one of the things that Compete Caribbean is really good at doing is searching and delivering innovative and practical solutions to some of the long-standing challenges of the region. And so the way we're set up is essentially we're a grant facility, and we're allowed to take on innovative projects, which tend to be inherently a little bit riskier than the traditional types of projects, but to be better able to prove business models and utilize the resources to pilot and to create a path towards sustainability of some of those projects. For the AgriTech project, what we wanted to do is we wanted to focus on firms, and we wanted to get firms, some persons with some of the challenges, some firms with some of the solutions, as Ralph alluded to, to kind of open up the vision and kind of recognize and see each other, and try to get some pilot projects together and start moving towards structuring well-defined businesses that they could potentially scale. And so we were working on this for just about 1 year now. And what we started with is we're doing a bunch of research as well into the agri-tech space in the Caribbean. We're going to be focusing on some of the same sectors that we spoke about here. For sure, we're going to be very interested in taking a deeper look at the fruits and vegetable space. We want to take another look at the sauces and spices space. And we want to take another look at the coffee and cocoa space. And essentially what we're really trying to identify are what are the real areas for opportunity, and what are some of the critical success factors in helping to build out the enabling environment, which a lot of the panel and fellow presenters spoke about. The other thing that Compete Caribbean can do is we can assist by partnering and working with governments to try to remove or at least reduce the impact of some of the major hurdles and challenges within the business environment. The other thing that we did under the project was we tried to build a bunch of awareness around the topic of agri-tech in the Caribbean and the opportunities. So many of the presenters that we would have seen over the last couple of days, we've been trying to engage with them. We've done quite a number of sessions, speaking specifically to agri-tech, looking at e-commerce, and really trying to figure out how you marry the two and trying to understand where the investments really lie. And so we're really grateful to Caribbean Export for continuing this great work here and pulling it together in a really major way. So in terms of the actual part you're really interested in and working directly with those agri-tech firms, essentially when we made the call, we do a bunch of our work by what we call innovation challenges. And essentially what that is, we just put a call out there, we put it all across the Caribbean, across the 13 member countries we work in. And essentially we said, we have resources. If you can provide us with some really innovative project proposals, you have a really good team and you're ready to begin to do this work or continue to do this work or scale the work that you've been doing, we'll be very happy to hear from you. And in doing so, we received just over 50 applications. We were able to narrow those down, and we've identified just about 14 companies that we wanted to work with. And so what we've been doing over the last couple of months is actually building their capacity as well. So many times you hear about farmers and the lack of education and all these different things that you normally hear with a traditional farmer. And what we wanted to do was to ensure that there's a strong business element to these pilots. And so we've been building capacity using some business development consultants. And we've been really, they've come through a program, and essentially what we ask them to do is to really structure a well-defined pilot that we can put some resources to test some of the critical elements of their business models. And so what we're really doing with this activity is really financing the early stage. This is the part before it's all figured out, before there's a well-defined story, a well-defined product, where we know for sure across the Caribbean that there are very particular and acute challenges in finding these types of resources. Most entrepreneurs, they have to bootstrap it. They have to take loans from families and friends. They have to sell the car and catch the bus. And this is where we thought that we could make a really serious impact and maybe even assist in some entrepreneurs in the region in figuring it out in a more advanced way. We don't want them to take 10, 15 years to figure out if it's going to work. We, given the COVID pandemic, given the direction that we see, given the long-standing issues within the agriculture space, we kind of wanted to advance their efforts and try to get it done now. So we've just come out of almost like a pitch competition, where after going through the capacity building, we're now trying to narrow the field a bit. And essentially what we're trying to do is identify just about, maybe 6 to 8 of these pilots that we really, really want to put more significant financing into. And so essentially what we're going to be doing is testing those underlying assumptions or hypotheses within some of the business models that were presented. Going forward, we want to, we'll be investing more resources into building out some of the firms or assisting them in scaling. And what we really want to do is we really want to take these lessons. We're documenting the process by which we take, and we're really evaluating, documenting it, and essentially we're helping to build startups from the ground up, and helping them to iterate, helping them to pivot. And essentially what we hope to come up with is a model that can work to assist and advance a wider scale of agri-tech or technology firms that are interested specifically in the agri-tech space in the Caribbean. And so we're engaged with a number of partners. We're still looking for partners. We're constantly willing to partner with anyone in this space. Diane, you're familiar with how we operate. And it's really great that Caribbean Export has stepped up and signaled, and so definitely we'll be very interested in engaging to figure out how we could potentially scale this model across the region. So thank you.
Wayne. It's really fantastic to see Compete. As you said, we have worked with Compete at Jampro on a number of projects. So we are really excited to see Compete in this space. And I know you've been very supportive of the castor oil cluster in Jamaica who want to Compete bid. So you've already answered one of the questions. Michael Penfield in the Q&A wanted to know if you still need business development and strategy consultants. So if you could put your contact details, Wayne, in the chat, or just put your email in the chat, because he wants to know how to contact you.
Sure, no problem.
And there's another question here for you. Is IDB Labs going to have more agri-tech investment challenges? I suppose they mean call for projects in the near future. And how can one get involved?
So what we've seen since we've been involved in this space, we've seen about 2 or 3 agri-tech calls across different regions and incorporating various countries. So we are aware that IDB Labs, they've done an agri-tech call as well. I'm not quite sure if they're planning to. Essentially, usually the way they work, they kind of pilot it similar to how we do, and then they if it works, then they scale it. So what I would say there is, I'm not quite sure if they will, but if it, it's a very interesting space. There's a lot of, the agri-tech space has a really strong developmental impact, right? It could potentially have a very large developmental impact, particularly for the Caribbean. And, with the 4th Industrial Revolution and the opportunity to advance the agriculture sector 100 years, it's a really strong value proposition. And I wouldn't be very surprised if a lot more donors begin to enter the space, particularly if we continue to have events such as this, right? In terms of Compete Caribbean, we're unlikely to have another agri-tech call, but I'm also aware that there was another agri-tech call which focused on the LATAM area. And so what we'll be trying to do is, we're monitoring to see exactly how we can partner and maybe even leverage some of these resources to bring the benefit to Caribbean firms as well. And so anything we hear about, we'll definitely be putting into our newsletter and disseminating. So to get this information, you can go over to the Compete Caribbean website, www.competecaribbean.org, and register for our newsletter, and we'll be happy to facilitate the information.
Thanks, Wayne. And I would also say to this person, anonymous attendee, that IDB Labs I've found extremely open to new technologies and to new and innovative projects. So I would just approach them. If you've got ideas about agri-tech or some R&D project, just approach them. It starts with a conversation, and you never know where that will go. But I think Wayne touched on some of the question of financing of agri-tech projects and agribusiness in general. We have a very poor record in the Caribbean of our commercial banking sector financing agribusiness. And so I was very excited to hear Ray in the pre-chat talk about Republic Bank and Republic Bank getting involved in agribusiness. And so, Ray, I'm going to put you on the spot and really ask you what kind of projects the Republic Bank has financed in the past, and what is your appetite to finance more projects in the agribusiness sector? And how do we in the Caribbean channel more finance into the agribusiness sector? Because it's really been languishing, I would say, for the last 20 years through lack of financing. You know, so
Sure.
yeah, Ray, I'm sure you're up to that challenge. Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Diane. And you know, it's a pleasure to be on this panel with the likes of Ralph and Wayne, people that I know in the region, and nice to see Jacko. In terms of our track record, so you know, Republic operates in about 14 jurisdictions, including Guyana, Suriname, Trinidad, Barbados, and Ghana. And the reason why I mentioned those particular jurisdictions, and forgot one, which is Grenada, is primarily because in those jurisdictions, especially in Guyana, we have a storied legacy or track record in relation to financing agriculture. Primarily in Guyana, I think to some extent in Suriname, it's really been around, you know, some of the commodity items, so rice and sugar. You know, in certain aspects, there may be some other products that or companies that we may finance that obviously produce or maybe farm at a micro level, but pretty dominant in Guyana. It's really been kind of the commodity items, and I think in Ghana as well. So really through the lens as to which we've traditionally seen agriculture is obviously from, I guess, from a large export perspective of commodity products, really going to European markets. And that's kind of been the model that has really been in place for quite some time in the region. And I think I'm really glad to be hearing this discussion, especially discussion around the 25 and 5 and potentially some of the things that Ralph is doing in terms of reducing imports, because you know this is an area that we think potentially is emerging, and it's one that we could obviously play in. That kind of old structure is really it's, you know, it's at the mercy of international commodity prices. Oftentimes it really, you know, it puts our communities, our local communities, really at the mercies of you know, tariffs out of Europe, and primarily just kind of consumer habits happening out of Europe. We saw that primarily in Guyana with sugar, how they kind of effectively kind of moved away from that and what that meant to that jurisdiction. So, you know, I say that to say that, you know, that the old way of doing, the old guard, the old lens as to what agriculture may have meant is probably not the way that we should be looking at it. You know, we see businesses like what, you know, the greenhouse agriculture businesses that are popping up as potentially bankable businesses, because it does mitigate against the potential environmental risks. So, you know, things that Ralph talked about in terms of, you know, controlling of the weather, including hurricanes and things like that. It does provide some measure of security in the sense that, you know, one of the big aspects around agriculture in the traditional land format is, you know, theft of the products. So we do think that that model is bankable, and we do like the emergence of technology now to really augment some of these, effectively emerging businesses in this area. And what we're kind of really heartened by is how effectively technology could make farmers, I think, much more operationally efficient in really providing data to us that allows us to then kind of risk manage, because we're in the business of, when I hear people say that, bankers don't want to lend money, it's always funny because, the business of what we do is ultimately managing risk. If we can't manage the risk, it's not likely that we're probably going to lend. It's just like if a farmer is farming and he can't sell his product, he's probably going to give up on that. So it's analogous to that. So we have to be able to kind of think of ways as to how we can mitigate risk so that we can free up capital, because ultimately we are conduits for depositors, or we have to protect our depositors' funds. So we have to make sure the adequate safeguards are in place. So I like the emergence of technology, because then it allows us to then look at data and then make some informed guesses, or really just some informed decisions as to whether or not, based on historical trends, whether or not the probability of this potential crop being produced is, X or Y. And that allows us to then kind of, at least, from our perspective, be able to then properly risk manage, this particular industry. In terms of our appetite, I think right now, we're very hungry for these opportunities, primarily because they're twofold. So I think we see the need for our region to have our own independent food security. I think, that's been topical in many of the discussions across, and even across this platform, with our leaders. So it's obviously us being the leading Caribbean bank. We want to make sure that we're actually promoting that. But then two, we're also thinking about this region, and no disrespect to the Canadian banks, but we're a Caribbean bank. We plan to be here in the next 100 years. If we look at this region, we look at it from the standpoint of being sustainable, and therefore we're going to make sure that the ecosystem in which we have to effectively live in is also going to be sustainable. So part of that is going to be that this aspect around mitigation and how we live in this environment, and to some extent around adaptation. We're probably going to be lending more into businesses that we think ultimately is going to solve for some of these food security issues, but ultimately is going to make sure that our bank continues to operate, because we have businesses that operate in the agriculture space. So it's almost something that is inherent in us, because we think about sustainability from the lens of being here in the Caribbean, and we have to effectively support businesses that we think ultimately is going to help this ecosystem in which we live in. So I mean, I'm not going to throw out any numbers in terms of what that appetite looks like, but what I will tell you is that quite recently we announced a US $200 million climate finance goal. Why I make reference to that is that in certain aspects, agriculture, especially agriculture technology, could be deemed as being a criteria or a key component for us achieving part of that goal that we set out. So if people are kind of concerned about whether or not the banks may have appetite, I could tell you that at least from our institution, and I know from many of the other ones, the NCBs out of Jamaica, and many of the other indigenous banks, that this is a conversation about us kind of fostering sustainable businesses, and this is definitely an area that we think, obviously, for our particular region, is really going to help our entire ecosystem. So we're happy to support it in any way. We definitely have a lot of appetite. We've been doing a lot of things around sustainable initiatives with the IDB, with the IFC, with a lot of the IFIs, and particularly in this area, we have a lot of appetite and a lot of interest.
Great to hear. Love to hear the commercial banks getting into this space, Ray. That's great. On behalf of one of the questions in our Q&A, what sort of scale do you finance? So this is a question from someone who has 5 acres of land, he says, and wants to know if you would fund a farm run by an agronomist and economist, so people who know what they're doing. But do you fund on that scale, number one? And number two, how can we expand the understanding of this agri-space on the part of our commercial banks so that we get more bank lending? And this is a question that's wider than Republic.
Yeah, on the first one, that's an easy one. I think we're micro to international. So anything between, here in the Red Sea, we'll finance. If you have a project and obviously you have details, depending on your jurisdiction, there's there are myriad of different contact points for you. So whether it be our corporate teams or our commercial teams, kind of happy to put you in contact with any of them. In terms of capacity building, and this is a very important point, because I think ultimately what the banks have to do, and the onus is really on us, is to really go into some of to really build that capacity internally, especially within our risk teams, to understand this industry. And this is not the only industry. There's a whole subset of emerging industries that we're also trying to build capacity in. And I think it's forums like this. It's obviously research that may be published from the likes of CABA or from many of the other organizations around this particular this industry that will allow us to kind of see the trends. We like to see numbers. We like, obviously, to be able to get a sense of trends, what's happening in the space. So, we're happy to kind of be part of these panels to really understand or hear directly from the likes of the entrepreneurs themselves. But I think what's really going to augment that is probably going to be independent research that allows us to then kind of really understand the space in a little bit more detail than maybe we currently do. To some of the points around potentially then how we could stimulate maybe activity from large commercial banks all the way down to some of the smaller ones, including credit unions. I mean, I like the idea that that Jacko threw out about potentially some kind of guarantee, in terms of yields from suppliers. So there needs to be some measure of protection for these farmers, in the sense that when we think about risk, ultimately, for us to really understand the yields, we're probably going to have to go do a whole bunch of research. But if you're producing something and you think it's the best quality, then stand behind it to effectively kind of de-risk the buyer. So absolutely, I love to hear that idea. I think diversity is probably another area that I think will help us then kind of think about not necessarily a single point risk, but potentially, we could. We're very comfortable if we understand that maybe a black swan event is not effectively going to make us or put our capital at risk. So if you have diversity in terms of your products, I think that will obviously help bankers really understand the risks that they're facing. And then this whole aspect around the development of the downstream industry, I think, is very important, which, things like, and I'll draw on this example, a company out of Trinidad decided, I think at one point they had, or they probably still have, the distribution license for Häagen-Dazs, and basically decided that they wanted to get into that space and started using a lot of homegrown effectively crops to integrate into their ice creams. And that, to me, that is the ingenuity that we need to start seeing in the Caribbean, is that somebody talked about our beautiful fruits that we have here. So then how is that not being kind of manufactured and then put on the shelf somewhere, as opposed to the likes of either, no disrespect to them, Swiss or American kind of chocolate or ice cream coming into the region. But that whole development of kind of the downstream industry, whether it be garments, whether it be the manufacturing side of things, I think is really going to allow us to then maybe not see a single point or offtake risk when we think about some of these commodities, and effectively some of the things I mentioned before with international, the external factors playing, having a play on it. If you have an offtaker who's local, and you don't have the pressures or the concerns about, maybe what, some European Parliament may decide in 2 years as to, their tariffs, then to me, from a banking perspective, that's a bankable business, and it's one that we ultimately will want to finance. So I would love to see more development of that. And then my last point is, I started to see, you touched on it before, which is then how do you pull together farmers, like herding cats, right? It's in their best interest to effectively have a single voice, especially a voice that's advocating on their behalf, because you're able to then kind of elevate things that are impacting all of them into a single discussion, and ultimately either with the policymakers or potentially with your financiers. You're able to then kind of speak in unison and maybe implement solutions that effectively helps the entire system. And I know in Guyana, for example, like there's like the rice board that ultimately, in some ways kind of speaks or negotiates on behalf of rice farmers versus the ultimate purchasers. And I do think that there needs to be some kind of advocacy around that. Whether it's the likes of Ralph, potentially being a little bit more, vocal in pulling together some of these things, but there needs to be it at the local level, and there needs to be advocacy at the regional level, so that way there is potentially a unison voice elevating some of these issues, I think, especially to the governments, and certainly in my instance, definitely to some of the bankers.
Right. Thanks a lot for that, Ray. That's really a very comprehensive look, and I'm really glad to hear that Republic Bank is willing to finance a range of different size of operation, from micro, as you said, to macro. We have two other financiers on board that I wanted to rope into the conversation now. Royal Messi Fund channel finance to small farmers. We've talked a lot about small farmers, and there was also actually a question about capacity building for female entrepreneurs or agripreneurs. So is that something that FarmFit Fund can help with? How do you assess risk in the small farmer projects, and how do you channel funds to small farmers?
Okay, thank you very much, Diane. Let me first explain a little bit more what the fund does. The FarmFit Fund is a blended finance fund focused on smallholder farmers, and has a view that in time, farmer finance can become an asset class. And as we all know, we're very far from that. Both sector players, but also financial institutions, are very reluctant to finance to smallholder farmers, which is a result of risk. It is a result of perceived risk because of lack of data. And on the other hand, we all know that financing farmers with relatively low amounts incurs high operating costs. So what is our approach? Our approach is to de-risk both financial players as well as value chain actors in lending to farmers, but also finance other investments, like for instance, CapEx can be, logistics can be, warehousing, that benefit farmers. Whatever investment we make, we always ask ourselves the question: what is the direct link between our investment and the benefit for farmers? And if there's none, we will stay away. Coming to AgTech, so your question: how do we channel our funds to smallholder farmers? Obviously, we don't do that directly. We work with banks. We work with value chain actors. So far, predominantly commodity traders in the coffee sector, in the cocoa sector, potentially other sectors as well, because we're fairly sector agnostic. And through the financial sector, whereby our experience is that it's we're still fairly young, operating since the beginning of last year, but that it's pretty hard to work together with commercial banks because of lack of focus on this sector, but also processes which are very much focused on key risk drivers. And if you don't have that as a bank, then it's difficult, even if we provide. So what we typically do, our products are first loss guarantees, junior loans, but we can also do equity, not so much in banks, but then we come to AgTech and FinTech, because the other aspect that of course is quite important is one, it's operating costs. How do you channel funds to smallholder farmers? And obviously, I think it was mentioned before, the availability of smartphones is making a huge difference. And the other side, of course, is more on the AgTech side, is improving farm yield and in particular farmer resilience. And in that aspect, I think it also deserves mentioning insurance, where we didn't make an investment so far, but we would definitely be interested. So that's the way we operate. Looking at the Caribbean, we are working throughout the emerging markets and developing countries, and Caribbean is definitely part of that, and also very much interested to engage in a conversation with either an industry player or a bank, for instance, to set up farmer financing schemes that achieve that we can channel funds, but also at an affordable rate. We are not here to distort markets, but the other hand, it should also be contributing in a positive way to the farmer business case. Then your other question was training female entrepreneurs and startups, and I think it is really interesting, and it's difficult to answer the question straight away. We are part of a larger organization called IDH Trade, and IDH Trade is more on the, let's say, the convening side, the grant side, and gender is an extremely important topic in our organization. And also within the fund, apart from, let's say, the farmer angle, the farmer livelihoods, also one of the key investment considerations is gender. So definitely interesting to talk about it, but it very much boils down, okay, how can we implement it? What is the size? But the topic is very exciting. So let's have a talk.
So, Roel, if I might ask, do you work with the Caribbean Development Bank, or do you prefer to work with national development banks? Because it seems to me that would be a good place for you, for FarmFit, to start working through our development banks, who tend to be wholesalers of funds, not direct lenders. They lend through AFIs.
That's correct. I think we can co-invest with development banks, but I think for us, so if you compare our risk appetite to development banks and commercial banks, we take more risk than development banks. Coming from a development bank myself, I can see that we are doing stuff that they would have nightmares about. But we look at things a little bit different. We want to support models which are innovative, which are new and still to some extent untested. Also in anticipation of these models, the successful models to be adopted by the market. So definitely we want to work together with development banks, but in particular with commercial banks, because in the end, our view is we are in a transition, probably a very slow transition, but in the end, the market has to take over financing this space.
Okay, great. So Dimitri, if I could ask you for your perspective before I call on Amy. I'm going to call on Amy right after you to give us a perspective on the female side. But Dimitri, you're in the financing space as well. So how do you see, you've heard from Roel, you've heard from Ray, how do you see Agrify and the role you can play in financing agriculture in the Caribbean? Dimitri, you there? Sorry, I can't see all the participants. I'm not sure if Dimitri is with us. If he's not, then I'm going to move to Amy to ask Amy very quickly to give us in a couple of minutes. We've got
Can you hear me?
Minutes. Hello?
Diana, can you hear
Dimitri,
me?
there you are. Okay.
Okay, sure. Okay, thanks.
Go ahead.
Let me maybe share my screen so that I can show you a small presentation of 3 or 4 slides. It won't take too much, so that I can explain a bit what Agrify stands for. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we're seeing it.
Okay, well, thanks for having me today. It's a great honor to have this opportunity to present Agrify in an area, I must say, that where we are not so present for the moment. But it is not going to be the case like that in the future. We really want to do more in this area. So Agrify is one of the EU instruments aiming to invest in sustainable projects with high impact on smallholder farmers. The objective is really to help smallholder farmers to transition from subsistence to commercial agriculture. Agrify is a collaboration between EDFI, so the European Development Finance Institution, which have been active for many years in the field of responsible investment, and the European Commission. We aim at catalyzing more investment in the agri-space, and on several projects we support our EDFI peers. We help them to de-risk their investment so that they could do more agri-investment in developing countries. This is our de-risking co-investor role. And our other positioning in the market is to be a market developer. We try to develop new projects to help companies which are today not attractive to commercial funders, and to help those companies to evolve smoothly. We propose very flexible financial solutions. So on the mandate and the impacts we are following, I think the message is clear. Our goal is to support projects that will allow smallholder farmers to enter commercial agriculture. And we believe that is the best way to fight food insecurity, for instance. On the right, you will see the indicators that we are following. And it is therefore very important to work with companies that are able to monitor these indicators. On the bottom line, we really try to intervene with commercial players, with commercial companies which are not attractive to bankers or other financial institutions. This is the last slide, just to show a bit how we address this market. To reach smallholder farmers organization, we work with 3 types of actors. We cannot work directly, obviously, with farmers, because we only work with formal companies. We work with funds to allow us to indirectly support small cooperatives and rural MFIs that are not very formalized. The second pillar is the MFI sector. We finance rural MFIs, which develop innovative products intended to farmers, in particular input pre-financing. Here we try to provide flexible solutions that encourage these actors to take more risk in agriculture, which is not always easy for them. And the third segment is the SME segment, which processes products sourced from smaller farmers. And this is, of course, the most complicated segment, but also the most interesting from a development, I think, point of view. Just a last slide on our offering. We are able to offer small, I think, small ticket size. It's still important, of course, but compared to other players, we can start at 500,000 euros up to 5 million. We can offer very long tenors, and this is, I think, one of our specificity and our added value in the market. We can offer up to 10 years, even sometimes more. We can also offer very flexible instrument depending on the needs of the company and also the appetite from other players, junior solution, senior debt, quasi-equity. We are sector agnostic, and we, of course, we need to show that we are additional, not disruptive in the market, because we are also a blending facility. We are not aiming to return a specific financial return to the EU. We are impact first instrument, but of course we need to make sure that we are not crowding out commercial funding from the market. When I say commercial terms, it means that, and I will give you an example, very concrete. For a company which is not profitable yet, but which has, of course, a good track record and a convincing track record, we can find solutions to make our loan, for instance, more affordable by providing, for instance, a low rate in the beginning, and that rate could increase in the future. And we could also design with the borrower a mechanism to share the profits to a certain extent, so that at the end we can target a return which is conform with the market, but still help the farmer and or the company to grow in an appropriate way. So that was, in a nutshell, what we are trying to do at Agrify. We started 3 years ago in 2018 with today fund 6 projects, probably 9 by the end of the year. So that was the presentation. Now maybe Diana, would you like me to say a word on AgTech, because that's
yeah, very quickly. What I'd ask you to do, Dimitri, because we only have 8 minutes left, and what I'm going to ask is if you could give us your perspective on what do you see as the priority actions that we need to take in the Caribbean to really develop the AgTech space. Because I'm going to come back to all the participants and ask you to say literally 2-3 sentences about what do you think concretely we need to do to raise our game in the AgTech space.
Well, I must say that I see the AgTech as a tool to de-risk SME, for instance, projects that we would like to finance, but which are too risky today. And AgTech can really play a role in de-risking those projects. And I give you an example. For instance, service companies are developing innovative models to support small-scale farmers toward a sustainable and commercial agriculture. For instance, artificial intelligence tools help farmers to better manage planting, purchase and control and monitoring systems, ensure proper use of fertilizer. New insurance products, very sophisticated products, can address both yields and price risk. And all those models working and make those companies more bankable. So this is not for us, and I'm not considering myself as a banker, but still, I'm looking at those projects from an impact perspective, but also from a financial risk perspective. And I see all those tools, which are really, we see that they are all emerging very much now in this universe, that those tools help us to do more in the smallholder farmer space. And that is really fantastic and very encouraging.
Great. Thanks very much. Amy, I'm going to give you 2 minutes, and then I'm going to go back to all of the participants and ask them what are the priority actions that you see in order for the Caribbean to raise its game in terms of adopting AgTech and using it really to improve productivity and production in the Caribbean. Amy, over to you for a couple of minutes.
Okay, well, I'll try to speak quickly and introduce myself. It's really nice to be able to join the summit a little bit impromptu. My name's Amy Wu. I'm an award-winning journalist, filmmaker, and the founder of From Farms to Incubators. So From Farms to Incubators, we're a platform that serves as a community and a convener for women in AgTech. We have a mission and objective to get more women involved in AgTech, which is like a really fast and growing sector. I'm joining you, by the way, from New York, in the Hudson Valley, New York, which really rich in the farming area. So we use also storytelling to amplify the voices of women leaders and founders and entrepreneurs in the space. There's an award-winning documentary that's been screened over 200 times, including South by Southwest. I put my information in my LinkedIn and also in there if you're interested in screening the documentary. And also there's a new book out that called From Farms to Incubators, Women Innovators Revolutionizing How Our Food is Grown. You can find it on Amazon or also just email me for it. We have 30 plus profiles of women leaders in AgTech. They either founded the company or led the company, a lot of them in the US, but the exciting news, which I'm going to speak even faster, I know I probably might have 30 seconds left, is that what's new from Farms to Incubators is we're partnering with AgTech companies, ag companies, educators, policymakers to create a new mentorship program that's going to be launching in 8 months. We're trying to develop the workforce to prepare women and young women to enter the AgTech field. So a lot of colleges and universities here in the US we're partnering with them and also looking for mentors in this area. For the Caribbean, there's a real opportunity to develop that new pipeline of women, next generation, who will be very passionate, I'm sure, about the new opportunities that you have spoken about in the summit. So I really hope to hear more about it, more from the participants, if you can find ways that maybe we can work together, or you're interested in the film and in the book as well. I'll also put the email, the website address here as well. So yeah, I'd love to speak to anybody who's interested in the women and gender aspect of having more women in AgTech and sitting on the boards of AgTech companies. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Amy. That's really important. I'll definitely think about women that we know of in the region who are in AgTech and who would benefit from being linked with you, because there are definitely some. We had one on our Jamaica panel on Tuesday, Shelley Heaven, and I'll certainly link her with you because she's doing some really interesting things in the AgTech space. So thanks for that, Amy. We'll be in touch. Okay, so let me go back through the panel members now and ask you concretely, what do you think governments and agencies such as CAIPA, CABA, COLE, ACP, CARICOM, what do you think we all should be doing to further AgTech in this space, and as I said, improve production and productivity? Ralph has to go, so I'm asking Ralph to speak first.
Thanks, Diane. I'll be very short. I have to run into a meeting with a major regional off-taker who wants to buy our produce from us, so I can't miss that opportunity. And I appreciate your question. I just wanted to wrap up for the project developers in the AgTech space in the Caribbean on a positive note, and to echo what Ray mentioned, is that there is money in the Caribbean available for this sector. Our company we have raised all of our private equity capital, 90% of it, from the Caribbean region, from partners in Barbados, in Antigua, in Trinidad. So the money is here, the interest is here on the private equity side, as well as what Ray has proven on the debt finance side. So be prepared. I'm going to take 2 seconds to talk about what is important and what you need to present to get access to that capital. The first one is market space, and that kind of speaks for itself. We're importing $6 billion a year in food, so the market space is huge. Get it into a part of it, specialize in a part of substituting those imports. Competition, who else is in the space? You know, study your competition, be better than them. Use proprietary technologies. Investors want to know that you have some level of proprietary technology and that they're able to license that technology. Early revenue, you need to present an investment scenario where the investors are going to see early revenue and quick payback, critical. And last but not least is the risk mitigation. You know, they're like all investors in the AgTech space need to know that you have mitigated the risks of your revenue stream as much as possible. So that's it. I just wanted to close off with that. Be positive. There is capital available here for all of you project developers in the AgTech space.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Ralph, and good luck with your meeting. That sounds great.
Thank you very much, Stan.
I think that the message I'm getting from Ralph is that the future is very bright for AgTech in the Caribbean, and I'm glad to hear that. So let me ask Jacko, Wayne, Vassel, Ray, Roel, for your final remarks in just a couple of sentences.
Yeah, I can kick off. I think what we would need is real, I would say, incubator money to really get AgTechs off the ground beyond the stage that the founders can, the capital that founders can give, and to bring it to the next stage where we can and other impact investors can be present.
Great, thanks, Roel. Who goes next?
Well, I can.
Okay, go ahead, Jacko.
I can go. I see some things not mentioned here is trust. So you have to regain trust also against corruption. So I think this is also important for the banks. So you have to gain trust. And also I miss one big opportunity that is not talked about is new income streams for farmers. So what I mean by that is you see a loss trend around carbon banking. So the carbon sequestration is becoming more important, but that also means that other income streams become more important. So we are now only focusing on the output of farming, but you also have the way of farming has to be paid one way or the other. So you have to create that transparency around it. How you do that way of farming, so that you not only dependent on the outcome of the risk of the climate. So if you have a bad harvest, you still have a base. You need a base of income by the way of farming. So that is just one short remark, and the rest is thank you for participating and looking forward to meet you once again.
Great, thanks so much, Jacko. Okay, Wayne.
I can go next. So I know I wanted to definitely second, the development of the pipeline and investing in the pipeline and helping to create those deal flows that can later on be able to leverage some of the private equity investment and the debt and that kind of thing. So there's plenty space there. That's where we're operating, and we're very, very happy to partner. But one of the other things that I think is going to be very critical going forward is the provision of access to international networks. and the continuation of events such as this. I've been able to, over the last couple of days, understand and see a number of partners, our potential partners. And I think, more importantly for entrepreneurs in this space, when you have an idea of who else is operating and who you can leverage to be able to get a sense of what's happening, not only in the Caribbean, but outside of the Caribbean, I think that, that tremendously helps. And so for me, deal flow and the development of the deal flow, as well as access to international networks.
Great, thanks. And Vassel, the final word for you.
Finally, I think if we can utilize the outcome of this event to establish some kind of formal institutional arrangements between the partners, some of the new partners, particularly financiers, to build an ecosystem that will support AgTech, strong value chains that remove some of the risks that Ray spoke to, so that we are not focusing on the traditional collateral-based lending, but based on strong value chains, strong market arrangements that will reduce the risk that I think will have provided the kind of foundation to drive AgTech in the region.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and if I could just kind of
Yes,
just add
go
to that, yeah, so Vassel, absolutely. I definitely think that if we could formalize something coming out of this where, next year we come back here, we have much more deal flow. And it's not just an ever-going conversation of gripes. We want to see activity in this space. And if it means that we can collaborate with the likes of CABA and CETA and many of these organizations, let's formalize that and work towards some kind of goal for next year.
Great, thanks a lot,
Great.
Fantastic. I know Suzette wanted to get out of this an action plan, and so Suzette, I think you got your action plan. And just before I turn over to Dami to wrap up, I just wanted to say that the one thing I didn't hear really coming out of this, I heard deal flow from Ray, and I think that's critical. And I think project origination is hypercritical because most of our businesses do business in too informal a manner. They don't do enough business planning. So we don't have projects that we can package to take to banks, to take to the market. And I think that that is one of the critical elements. There is a Caribbean project preparation facility, which I don't have time to talk about now, but if you want to find out more, ask Suzette Hudson of KIPA. I think that is one of the critical elements. But I think, Suzette, you've had enough substance this morning from our fantastic panelists. And really, you guys have been amazing. I think you have really given us a lot of input, a lot of content, and a lot to think about over the next few days. So we will definitely wheel and come again. My apologies, Caribbean Export, for having overshot the time by 7 minutes, but it's been a fascinating discussion and I think really augurs well for the future of AgTech in the Caribbean. So I'm going to turn over to Dami now to give the final wrap-up words.
Thank you very much, Diane, and thank you to your panelists. I listened very, very carefully to this entire panel, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think the discussions were rich. I personally would not have minded if it went on for another 30 minutes, but I know everybody in this virtual age, it's much more difficult to sustain attention virtually. So one of my hopes is that as we move ever so slowly towards the end of this pandemic, that perhaps next year we can actually sit in person and meet and have this discussion in a very, very fulsome way. So that's my actual hope. So with that being said, I would like to say thank you very much to all the participants who took part in this summit over the past 3 days. Over the 3 days, I was looking at the attendance figures on Zoom, and one of the things I noted is that we consistently maintained the same amount of attendees over the entire 3 days, which is very, very good, because what you find is that after the first day, some persons drop off. That in attendance was consistent over the last 3 days, which means to say that persons found a lot of value in the discussions and they tuned in for more. I was especially happy in terms of the country presentations. I was able to sit in a couple of them myself, and I thought they were very, very good. I would like to say congratulations to all the presenters, including the Honorable Aldi Shaw and his team from Jamaica, the team from the Turks and Caicos Islands, the team from Belize, Dr. Leroy Almendarez, and his team, Mr. the Honorable Albert Ramdin from Suriname, and the Honorable team from St. Vincent and Grenadines as well. I thought the country presentations were extremely well done. I also would like to thank all the presenters from our first session, entitled Expanding Agribusiness in the Caribbean, Annette, Vassel, Jeremy, and Dr. Patrick Antoine, as well as from session 3, Why the Caribbean for High-Tech Agri-Investment, Daniel Abraham, Dr. Roger Hussein, and Mr. Peter Dillon. Overall, I thought over the 3 days, the discussions were absolutely rich, and I think we have a lot to digest upon. Not only Caribbean Export and Kuiper, but also CABA, COL, ACP, Compete Caribbean, Republic Bank, and all of the other participants. Our hope is, I'm gonna put this on Suzette, is to digest all of this material and to come out with a work plan for the agri-tech sector. Our goal is to increase the number of bankable proposals in the agri-tech sector to attract investment, both foreign direct from banks, local investment, and to see firms in the agri sector grow and adopt agricultural technologies in their operations to raise their competitiveness. So we've set the bar pretty high coming out of this forum. We have a lot of work to do. This is just only the very, very first step. We have 99% of the jobs still to come, but rest assured, Caribbean Export has taken and listened. Kuiper, we've listened, and we have we will digest the material and we will come together with a work plan that will take this sector forward. So once again, on behalf of everyone involved in this planning and on behalf of Deodat Maraj, the Executive Director of Caribbean Export Development Agency, the management and staff of Caribbean Export Development Agency, the team at Kuiper, we would like to thank everyone once again for participating, and we wish you all a wonderful day, and please keep safe out there. Things are getting bad with the virus, but please, please keep safe. So have a good day and enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.
Thanks, Danny. Bye.